If you don't follow the rules of the system, you're destined to be forgotten. With this harsh truth, Herman Melville, a man who dedicated his life to understanding the depths of the human soul and the meaning of existence, confronts us with the darkest side of society, a world that almost instinctively eliminates anyone who doesn't conform, anyone who dares to reject its logic. In this video, we delve into Melville's profound reflections on the human condition and the society of his time, and how his message remains strikingly relevant today. We will do this by exploring his work, Bartleby, the Scrivener, a story of Wall Street, a narrative we chose to highlight because it is filled with invaluable lessons and critical insights that deserve to be understood and examined. We will begin with a brief look at the life of this American writer, poet, and literary critic, then analyze the most significant passages of his work, and finally reflect on the profound message he left as a legacy to the world. Herman Melville was born on August 1, 1819, in New York City, into a family that was initially well off. His father, a merchant of luxury goods, went bankrupt and died prematurely, leaving young Herman and his family in severe financial distress. This trauma deeply affected his life, forcing him to abandon his studies and take on odd jobs, including working as a sailor, an experience that would heavily influence much of his literary work. Melville grew up in a large family with several siblings, although specific details are scarce. What is certain is that, following the financial collapse caused by his father's failure, the Melville family endured severe hardships, losing their social status and facing economic instability that left a profound mark on all its members. These familial bonds, shaped by difficulty and sacrifice, left an indelible impression on Melville's outlook on life and the themes explored in his narratives. Melville's life was one of striking contrasts. On the one hand, his early success with works like Typee, 1846, and Omu, 1847, inspired by his travels in the South Seas. On the other hand, the lack of understanding and appreciation for Moby Dick, 1851, during his lifetime, a work now considered his greatest masterpiece, but initially met with a cold reception. His writing delves into themes such as alienation, the conflict between the individual and society, and the struggle to find meaning in existence. These themes resonate strongly in Bartleby, the Scrivener, published in 1853, a work that garnered little attention during his lifetime, but was later recognized as a universal critique of modern society. Melville passed away on September 28, 1891, nearly forgotten by the literary world. Now let's dive into his masterpiece, his Bartleby the Scrivener, A Wall Street Story. The story is narrated in the first person by the lawyer, who serves as both the central character and the narrator. Through his eyes and reflections, the reader experiences the events of the story. This narrative choice not only draws the audience closer to the protagonist's thoughts and emotions, but also offers an intimate and subjective perspective on the themes of the work. While maintaining his distance, Melville creates a direct connection between the reader and the lawyer, allowing an exploration of the moral and personal dilemmas that unfold throughout the story. The narrative begins with the lawyer introducing the world of scriveners, essential figures in an era when every legal document had to be copied by hand. He describes himself as a calm man, accustomed to avoiding conflicts and devoted to a job revolving around the deeds, mortgages, and bonds of the wealthy. His office is located in the heart of Wall Street, in a room facing oppressive walls, symbols of the confinement and limitations that permeate the entire narrative. Bartleby is introduced as an enigmatic figure. Hired as a scrivener, he initially impresses everyone with his dedication. Melville writes, "At first, Bartleby copied with an energy that seemed as though he were making up for years of silence. Yet, the unsettling side of his character soon begins to emerge. When the lawyer asks him to review a document, Bartleby responds with the phrase that will become his hallmark, 'I would prefer not to.' This seemingly innocuous response unsettles the lawyer and lays the foundation for the entire plot. Bartleby offers no explanation, nor does he show signs of rebellion. He simply refuses with a disarming calm. Later, the author writes, "Man, chained to his tasks, becomes a machine that copies, and every day loses a fragment of his soul." It is as if Melville is suggesting that capitalism slowly and silently devours people's souls one by one. The phrase, "I would prefer not to," becomes a symbol of passive resistance. Melville does not portray Bartleby as a revolutionary, but rather as an individual progressively withdrawing from the world. The lawyer, perplexed, initially tries to rationalize his behavior. "I thought perhaps he had misunderstood my request," he reflects. But as the refusals persist, the lawyer realizes that his scrivener represents something far more complex, a systematic rejection of social and work-related expectations. As the story unfolds, we learn that Bartleby lives in the office, sleeping on a shabby couch and subsisting on little more than ginger biscuits. This detail highlights his isolation and complete detachment from the outside world. Melville writes, "The wall outside his window was all Bartleby knew of the world, and he seemed strangely content with it. The scene becomes a powerful symbol of self-imposed confinement, as well as the desolation of modern life." The lawyer, driven by a mix of compassion and frustration, tries to help Bartleby. He offers him money, suggests other jobs, and even attempts to move the office to rid himself of Bartleby's presence. Yet Bartleby remains immovable, like a pillar, refusing every effort to change. When the lawyer directly asks why he won't leave, Bartleby responds with his usual, "I would prefer not to." One of the most poignant moments in the story comes when the lawyer discovers that Bartleby had previously worked as a clerk at the dead letter office in Washington, sorting undelivered mail. This detail casts an unsettling light on the character. Melville writes, "What is more desolate than dead letters? Messages of love, hopes, and forgiveness that never reached their destination." Bartleby thus becomes a symbol of a society that destroys individuals through indifference and bureaucracy. His decline culminates in his arrest for refusing to leave the lawyer's office, despite the latter's repeated efforts to find a solution. After exhausting every option to keep Bartleby housed, the lawyer decides to relocate his practice to another building, leaving Bartleby behind in the now empty office. However, Bartleby remains, becoming a problem for the new owner and the other tenants. The new landlord, exasperated by the situation and Bartleby's passivity, calls the authorities, and Bartleby is arrested for vagrancy. He is then taken to a prison known as the Tombs, a symbolic space representing complete alienation from society. This moment, heavy with symbolism, underscores Bartleby's inevitable exclusion from a system incapable of tolerating his passivity and refusal to conform. The epilogue of the story takes place in the prison, where Bartleby, now resigned, refuses even to eat. Despite the lawyer's guilt and affection, as he tries to improve Bartleby's conditions during his time in jail, Bartleby continues to withdraw further into silence and immobility. In the end, Melville describes the character's death with devastating simplicity. "They found him lying in the yard, facing the wall. He was dead, but his expression was serene. This ending, as enigmatic as Bartleby's life, leaves the reader with more questions than answers. The author further adds, "Society disposes of Bartleby like a dead letter, never read, never understood." Through this extraordinary work, Melville leaves a wealth of profound and timeless lessons. Now let's explore them one by one. Alienation in modern society. Melville highlights how American society, with its focus on capitalism and productivity, has created an environment where individuals are reduced to mere cogs in an economic machine. Bartleby, with his quiet refusal to perform the tasks assigned to him, represents the dehumanization brought about by a system that values people only for what they can produce. His "I would prefer not to" becomes a form of passive resistance, a way of withdrawing from a system that fails to acknowledge the inherent worth of the individual. Critique of American capitalism. Wall Street, the economic heart of America, symbolizes a world where profit has replaced compassion and humanity. Melville doesn't merely critique the economic system, but calls out the lack of empathy and understanding that capitalism amplifies. The lawyer, who initially tries to understand Bartleby, represents a society that seeks to fix those who do not conform, but ultimately abandons those who cannot fit into its rules. In a striking passage, Melville writes, "Capitalism does not punish inertia. It eliminates it as though it were a mistake to be corrected." Loneliness and indifference. One of the central themes of the work is loneliness, not just Bartleby's, but also the lawyer's, and by extension, that of all human beings. Melville demonstrates how, in an increasingly individualistic world, people find themselves isolated, unable to establish meaningful connections. Bartleby is a reflection of this extreme loneliness, made even more tragic by his complete lack of significant interactions. The human condition, rejection, and resignation. Melville delves into the sense of futility and powerlessness that can afflict humanity. Bartleby embodies those who, when faced with life, choose silent refusal over active rebellion. As the author states, Bartleby is not a rejection of society, but its victim, the silence of someone who has nothing left to say. This passivity, though a form of resistance, offers no solutions and leads to a slow decline, mirroring a society incapable of changing itself. A broader critique of humanity. Melville urges reflection on how we relate to those who are different or non-conforming. The story illustrates how the inability to understand and accept others can lead to exclusion and destruction. Bartleby is not just a victim of the system, but also of our collective failure to recognize and embrace those who find happiness outside conventional norms. Melville's lesson. The author teaches that the worth of a human being cannot be measured by their economic utility or ability to adapt. Through Bartleby, he urges us to look beyond appearances, to recognize the dignity and pain of every individual, and to reflect on how society can become more compassionate and less alienating. Melville's critique extends beyond capitalist America, addressing humanity as a whole and emphasizing the universal need for connection, understanding, and empathy. This is not merely a story about passive resistance or silent rebellion. It is a profound reflection on the meaning of freedom, the nature of work, and the value of human connection. The phrase, "I would prefer not to," so simple yet so powerful, still resonates today as a warning against blind conformity and the loss of self in an increasingly dehumanizing world. And so one might ask, how many people live their lives like Bartleby? In silence, trapped in a routine, they lack the courage, strength, or opportunity to challenge.